10. She met Bruce Lee in the most unexpected place. Before Linda Lee Cadwell became the wife of the world's greatest martial arts icon, she was simply Linda Emery, a blonde American college student from Everett, Washington, who had never thrown a punch in her life. It was 1963, and she was attending Garfield High School in Seattle, the same city where Bruce Lee was running a small martial arts school while studying philosophy at the University of Washington. Their worlds could not have been more different. She was a cheerleader, raised in a conservative Christian household, and he was a brash, confident young man from Hong Kong teaching a fighting style most Americans had never heard of, Jeet Kune Do. Their first meeting wasn't a movie-style moment. Linda first saw Bruce giving a kung fu demonstration at a local martial arts exhibition. She later recalled being completely mesmerized, not just by his lightning-fast moves, but by the energy he carried. He wasn't just fighting air. He was performing philosophy through motion. When she later joined one of his classes at the University of Washington, she found herself struggling to keep up, yet drawn to him for reasons she couldn't explain. Bruce noticed her determination. She wasn't just another student mimicking moves. She asked questions. She wanted to understand why a punch was thrown a certain way, or how body mechanics connected to inner balance. That curiosity impressed him. Slowly, their student-teacher relationship turned into something deeper. By 1964, they were inseparable. Against the expectations of the era, interracial marriage was still controversial in America at that time, Bruce and Linda married in August 1964. They didn't care about the social pressure, the criticism, or the whispers. They simply believed in each other. Their wedding was small and private, but symbolic of something larger. Two cultures joining in defiance of convention. She wasn't marrying a star. Bruce was still working odd jobs, teaching small groups in parking lots and gyms. Yet Linda saw something in him the world hadn't yet recognized. A burning vision that could not be contained. Years later, when Bruce became an international icon, Linda would often say that from the very beginning, she knew he was destined to change the world. What's fascinating is that Linda didn't just stand by her man. She was part of the foundation he built. She helped type his manuscripts, edited his English writings, and even contributed to his philosophical notes. When Bruce wrote, "Be water, my friend," it wasn't just poetry. Linda was the one who made sure his words reached paper, preserved forever. Their partnership wasn't about glamour or fame. It was built on discipline, curiosity, and shared belief. Number 9. She was by his side. Through poverty and rejection. Today, the name Bruce Lee instantly evokes fame, movies, and martial arts mastery. But when Linda married him, none of that existed. The couple's early life together was brutally hard. They lived in a tiny apartment in Oakland, California, surviving on the small income Bruce earned from teaching a few private students. Linda was just 21, juggling her duties as a new mother when Brandon was born in 1965, while Bruce spent his nights planning lessons and writing about martial philosophy. Hollywood wasn't interested in a Chinese actor teaching kung fu. When Bruce tried to break into film and television, he was told his accent was too thick and his face too foreign for American audiences. Even when he auditioned for the Green Hornet in 1966, producers hesitated until they saw his speed. Linda was the one who encouraged him to take that chance, even when they had no guarantee of success. She became his emotional anchor during the years of rejection, when studios turned him away or edited out his best scenes. What's often overlooked is how much Linda sacrificed. She gave up her own teaching career to support Bruce's dream. When he began developing Jeet Kune Do, Linda managed schedules, typed out his manuscripts, and took care of their children while Bruce trained relentlessly. Their days were structured like a military routine. Bruce would train for hours, then write, then teach, while Linda handled everything else. She wasn't just a wife, she was the operational backbone of the Lee family. In interviews years later, Linda said, "Bruce always believed that success would come. even when it looked impossible. I believed in him because he never doubted himself. That faith was tested repeatedly. Bruce faced both racism and financial struggles. When he returned to Hong Kong in the early 1970s to pursue acting opportunities, it was Linda who convinced him that going back home might be the opportunity he needed. She stayed behind with their children at first, taking care of everything while Bruce tried to rebuild his career overseas. Her resilience during that time is rarely talked about. She managed life in 2 countries, raising Brandon and Shannon, while Bruce was filming The Big Boss and Fist of Fury in Hong Kong. Every letter she received from him was filled with love, exhaustion, and hope. Linda would later say that during those long months apart, she learned what true partnership meant. Not just sharing success, but carrying each other through separation and uncertainty. And when fame finally hit, explosively, Linda found herself at the center of chaos. Bruce had become an international sensation almost overnight. Fans followed them everywhere, reporters camped outside their home, and the pressure of stardom began to weigh on him. Through it all, Linda remained calm, grounded, and focused. She once told a friend, "I knew the man, not the myth, and I loved the man." When Bruce died suddenly in 1973 at just 32 years old, Linda's world collapsed. Yet instead of breaking, she became the guardian of his legacy, a role she would carry for the rest of her life. But that, of course, is a story we'll explore later in this list. Her 8. She helped shape. Bruce Lee's philosophy and legacy. Many people think Bruce Lee's philosophy was born entirely from his own mind, a fusion of martial arts, Taoism, and self-discipline. But those who knew him best knew that Linda was not only his companion but his intellectual sparring partner. When Bruce studied philosophy at the University of Washington, Linda was one of the few people who could keep up with his intense, analytical discussions about human potential, spirituality, and identity. She often helped him organize his chaotic handwritten notes, transform them into coherent essays, and edit his letters that later became essential parts of his books, including Tao of Jeet Kune Do. Bruce was a visionary, but he was also restless. His thoughts would explode faster than he could write them. Linda helped give those ideas structure. She understood the man behind the energy. When Bruce said, "All fixed patterns are incapable of adaptability," she saw not just a martial principle, but a philosophy of life. She helped him translate that into something others could understand. Friends of the couple described their home as a philosophy lab. Bruce would pace across the living room, passionately dictating ideas about self-expression and inner freedom, while Linda sat typing, asking questions that forced him to clarify his meaning. She'd ask things like, "What does it mean to express yourself honestly in combat?" Or, "How does this apply to daily life?" Those dialogues became the foundation of Bruce's written work, not just martial technique, but human expression. Linda's influence extended far beyond the home. She also served as his creative and emotional counselor during the making of Enter the Dragon. Bruce was dealing with enormous pressure from Warner Brothers, cultural tension between Hollywood and Hong Kong, and constant exhaustion. It was Linda who kept him mentally balanced, reminding him why he started his journey. Not for fame, but for authenticity. When Bruce passed away so suddenly in 1973, Linda faced a world that wanted to own his image. Everyone, studios, publishers, fans, tried to define who Bruce Lee was, but Linda was the one person who truly understood him as both a man and a mind. In the years that followed, she carefully organized his writings, interviews, and philosophies into coherent archives. She spent decades ensuring that his true ideas weren't twisted into myths or commercial slogans. She often said in interviews, "My mission is not to make Bruce Lee famous. He already is, but to make sure people understand why he mattered." That's why she co-authored Bruce Lee, The Man Only I Knew in 1975, a book that became the emotional blueprint for the biopic Dragon, The Bruce Lee Story, 1993. The book was deeply personal, showing Bruce not as an untouchable icon, but as a husband, father, thinker, and dreamer. Through Linda, Bruce Lee's message continued to inspire generations, from martial artists to filmmakers, from philosophers to everyday people seeking self-discovery. Without her steady hand preserving his work and vision, much of his wisdom might have been lost to time or commercial distortion. In many ways, Bruce Lee changed the world, but Linda ensured the world never forgot why. Number 7. She was devastated by Bruce Lee's death, but turned her pain into purpose. July 20th, 1973. Hong Kong. The day that changed everything. Bruce Lee was at the peak of his fame, editing Enter the Dragon, preparing for global release. That night, Linda received a phone call that shattered her world. Bruce had collapsed and was pronounced dead at only 32. No warning, no goodbyes. Just a sudden silence where once there had been boundless energy. Linda later described the moment as the end of breath itself. She was 28 years old, left with 2 young children, Brandon and Shannon, and a legacy that millions would soon turn into legend. The headlines were merciless. Rumors spread across Hong Kong and America. Whispers of foul play, secret affairs, even curses. Everyone had a theory, but no one had compassion. Instead of retreating into grief, Linda chose to confront it head-on. She organized Bruce's memorials, managed his estate, and faced an onslaught of media chaos with a level of composure that stunned reporters. At the public memorial in Seattle, she spoke through tears, but with clarity. Bruce was not only a man of strength and speed, but of truth and spirit. His body is gone, but his essence remains with us. Behind the scenes, though, her pain was unimaginable. She later revealed that the first few months felt like walking through fog. Every room in their home reminded her of him, the sound of his typewriter, the rhythm of his wooden dummy training, even the smell of liniment oil. But Linda wasn't one to surrender to despair. She knew Bruce wouldn't have wanted that. She returned to teaching, her original profession, and raised her children with the same resilience Bruce embodied. But she also knew that her husband's message could not die with him. That's when she began writing Bruce Lee, The Man Only I Knew. It was part memoir, part emotional healing. Every chapter was a confrontation with memory, sometimes tender, sometimes painful. She said later that writing that book was her way of talking to Bruce one last time. The book became a bestseller, not because it sensationalized his life, but because it told the truth, the sacrifices, the struggles, and the spirit of a man who refused to conform. In 1993, when Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, hit theaters, Linda was heavily involved as a consultant. She worked with director Rob Cohen to ensure the film honored Bruce's humanity. Actress Lauren Holly portrayed her, not as a side character, but as the emotional anchor of Bruce's life. Critics praised the film for capturing the soul of the legend through Linda's perspective. It showed how she became the bridge between Bruce's private world and the myth he left behind. While others saw her as the widow of Bruce Lee, Linda saw herself as the keeper of his flame. She once said, "Grief never disappears. It becomes part of you, but it can also become your purpose." Over time, Linda transformed from grieving wife to cultural guardian. She gave lectures, interviews, and supported documentaries, not for fame, but to protect Bruce's image from exploitation. She rejected multiple commercial offers that tried to profit from his name without respect for his values. Through her quiet strength, Linda reminded the world that love and purpose can coexist with loss. Every time she spoke about Bruce, there was no bitterness, only reverence. She told audiences, "People see Bruce as a god. I saw him as a man who wanted to give everything he had to the world." And he did. Her journey from heartbreak to healing became one of the most profound parts of Bruce Lee's legacy, the continuation of a dream through the woman who refused to let it die. Number 6. She raised Brandon and Shannon with Bruce's philosophy. After Bruce's death, Linda found herself standing at a crossroads that would have broken most people. She was only 28, suddenly a single mother with 2 children, Brandon, just 8 years old, and Shannon, barely 4. The world expected her to fade quietly into the background, but she did the opposite. She decided that if Bruce's body was gone, his spirit would live on through their children. Linda became both mother and father, the teacher and protector. She knew she couldn't erase them in the shadow of a legend without teaching them how to stand in their own light. She taught them Bruce's values: discipline, humility, and constant self-improvement. She hung his quotes around their home, phrases like, "Absorb what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own." These weren't just words on paper. They became the foundation of how her children would see the world. Brandon, in particular, took his father's energy to heart. He studied martial arts, followed Bruce's training routines, and soon found his own passion in acting. But Linda never forced him down that path. She simply supported his curiosity. When Brandon was old enough to ask about his father, Linda didn't tell him stories of an untouchable hero. She told him about the man who made pancakes for breakfast, who read poetry at night, who believed in discipline more than destiny. Shannon, too, inherited her father's creative spark and Linda's calm wisdom. While Brandon explored the physical side of Bruce's legacy, Shannon focused on preserving the intellectual and cultural impact of her father's teachings. Linda encouraged that difference. She never wanted her children to become copies of Bruce Lee. She wanted them to be the evolution of his ideals. Life wasn't easy. The media constantly reminded them who Bruce was: documentaries, interviews, endless speculation. Linda had to balance honoring Bruce's memory with protecting her children from becoming public symbols. She deliberately raised them away from Hollywood's chaos, focusing on education, inner strength, and personal identity. When Brandon decided to return to the spotlight in the late 1980s, Linda supported him fully. She watched him grow into a confident, charismatic actor who reminded everyone of his father, not through imitation, but through authenticity. And yet, fate would test Linda once again in the cruelest way imaginable. In 1993, just weeks before Dragon, the Bruce Lee story was released, the very movie based on Linda S. book, Brandon was tragically killed on the set of The Crow in a freak on-set accident. He was only 28. It was as if history had repeated itself, and Linda was forced to relive her worst nightmare. The world mourned Brandon, seeing eerie parallels between father and son. But for Linda, this wasn't mythology. It was heartbreak. Yet, even through that pain, she never spoke with bitterness. In one of her most emotional interviews, she said, "I lost my husband to his destiny. I lost my son to his dream, but I will not lose what they stood for." She became even more dedicated to preserving both their legacies. Together with Shannon, she later helped establish the Bruce Lee Foundation, a nonprofit organization that promotes self-expression, physical fitness, and cross-cultural understanding through Bruce's teachings. For Linda, this was the full circle, raising children not just by blood, but by philosophy. The Lee name, under her guidance, became more than a legend. It became a living message of perseverance, purpose, and peace. 5. She inspired Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, and protected its truth. In Hollywood, true stories often get twisted for entertainment. But when Universal Pictures approached Linda in the early 1990s about turning her book, Bruce Lee, the Man Only I Knew, into a film, she agreed, on one condition: that Bruce's spirit, not his celebrity, would be at the heart of it. Linda worked closely with director Rob Cohen, screenwriter Edward Kamara, and actor Jason Scott Lee, who portrayed Bruce, to ensure authenticity. She didn't want a typical biopic. She wanted an emotional journey that reflected the struggle of two people trying to build a dream across cultures. She described Bruce and herself as a team that believed in impossible things. That emotional foundation became the film's core. Linda's fingerprints were all over the production. She provided personal letters, training notes, and memories that shaped the script. She explained Bruce's sleepless nights during The Green Hornet, the frustrations of being rejected for roles, and the quiet moments of joy they shared when success finally arrived. She wanted the film to show that Bruce Lee wasn't born a superstar. He was forged through pain, perseverance, and love. The result was powerful. Dragon. The Bruce Lee story premiered in 1993 to critical acclaim. Audiences were captivated, not just by Bruce's martial arts scenes, but by the human story between Bruce and Linda. Their interracial love in the 1960s, their struggles in Hollywood, their determination to stay true to themselves, it resonated deeply with people who had ever felt like outsiders fighting to be seen. But what made the film even more haunting was its timing. Just before its release, Brandon Lee passed away. The movie suddenly became more than a biopic. It was a family's echo through generations. For Linda, attending the premiere was both cathartic and agonizing. She watched her life replayed on screen, the laughter, the heartbreak, the moments of triumph, while knowing that both Bruce and Brandon were gone. After the premiere, when asked how she felt seeing her story unfold before millions, Linda simply said, "It was like watching love itself, immortal and untouchable." She praised Jason Scott Lee and Lauren Holly for capturing their essence without exaggeration. But she also admitted that reliving those memories reminded her of the weight she carried. More importantly, Dragon became a turning point in how the world saw Bruce Lee, not as an untouchable fighter, but as a philosopher, husband, and father. That perspective came entirely from Linda's influence. Without her, Bruce's story might have remained one-dimensional, just another martial arts tale. But through her eyes, the world saw the man behind the legend. Even after the film's success, Linda maintained her integrity. She refused to commercialize Bruce's image, declining countless licensing deals that misrepresented his values. "Bruce stood for truth," she said, "and I will not let truth be sold." That statement became her lifelong mission. Through Dragon and beyond, Linda Lee Cadwell didn't just honor Bruce, she reintroduced him to a new generation. Millions who were born long after his death discovered his story through her courage and love. And in doing so, she proved something Bruce himself once said: "The key to immortality is first living a life worth remembering." Literature Kafour. She built the Bruce Lee Foundation to keep his philosophy alive. In the decades after Bruce's death, the world remembered him mostly for his movies: the lightning-fast kicks, the nunchaku, the scream that could freeze a crowd. But Linda Lee Cadwell knew that behind every strike was a philosophy, one that had the power to change lives far beyond martial arts. That's why, in 2002, she helped her daughter Shannon establish the Bruce Lee Foundation. For Linda, this wasn't just a memorial, it was a movement. She once said, "Bruce was more than a fighter. He was a thinker who used motion to express the soul." The Foundation-ES mission was to preserve that intellectual and spiritual legacy, to teach people that Bruce's true message wasn't about fighting others, but mastering oneself. Linda became a key advisor, helping shape the Foundation's educational programs and public exhibitions. She ensured that Bruce's original writings, thousands of pages of notes on philosophy, fitness, and personal expression, were carefully preserved, digitized, and shared with the world. Many of those notes were ones she had personally typed or helped organize back in the 1960s. Through workshops, lectures, and collaborations with schools, the Foundation taught young people to live by Bruce's principles: honesty in expression, self-discipline, and adaptability. Linda believed these weren't just martial arts lessons. They were life skills. She often reminded the team that Bruce's, quote, "Be water, my friend," wasn't poetic fluff. It was a life compass. Under her guidance, the Foundation became a bridge between cultures. It brought together fans from Asia, America, and Europe, united not by action films, but by the idea of continuous growth. Linda worked quietly behind the scenes, often letting Shannon take the public spotlight, but her influence was unmistakable. She was the Foundation OS living memory, the one who had seen Bruce S. evolution firsthand. What made the Foundation special was its authenticity. In a world filled with martial arts myths and commercialized tributes, Linda ensured that every project, every exhibit stayed true to Bruce's core, self-expression without limitation. She rejected any attempt to turn him into a product. For Linda, Bruce wasn't a brand. He was a message, a reminder that the human spirit could break boundaries if it refused to conform. The Bruce Lee Foundation eventually expanded its mission beyond martial arts, funding youth mentorship programs and leadership camps. Linda was especially proud of those, often attending quietly to meet students who had never known Bruce personally but spoke of him as a guiding force. One teenager told her, "Bruce Lee taught me to believe in myself." Linda smiled and replied, "That's exactly what he wanted." Even in her later years, she remained deeply connected to the Foundation's work. She helped oversee the release of Bruce Lee, Wisdom for the Way, a collection of his philosophical writings curated for new generations. And though she preferred to stay out of the spotlight whenever she appeared at public events, audiences treated her with reverence, not just as Bruce's widow, but as the guardian of his wisdom. In interviews, Linda once summarized her mission perfectly. "People think Bruce Lee was about strength, but his real power was love. Love for truth, for life, and for the potential in every person. That's what I want the world to remember." Through the Foundation, she ensured that love would never fade. Year 3. She found love again, but never let go of Bruce's spirit. After decades of loss and rebuilding, Linda did something few expected. She allowed herself to love again. In 1988, 15 years after Bruce's passing, Linda married a man named Tom Bleecker, a screenwriter and martial arts practitioner who admired Bruce deeply. But the marriage was short-lived, ending just 2 years later. Many assumed Linda would never remarry, that her heart belonged solely to Bruce. But destiny had one more chapter for her. In 1991, she met Bruce Cadwell, a former professional baseball player turned real estate agent, whose kindness and quiet strength reminded her of the balance she'd been missing. They shared the same last name by coincidence, Cadwell, but the connection between them went deeper. He wasn't interested in fame or the weight of Bruce's legacy. He loved Linda for who she was, a woman who had lived through extraordinary love and unimaginable loss, yet still carried grace. They married soon after and settled in Boise, Idaho, far from Hollywood, far from the noise of the world that still worshipped Bruce Lee. Together they built a simple, peaceful life. Neighbors often had no idea who Linda was. To them, she was just a friendly woman who walked her dog every morning and tended to her garden. It was the life she had quietly longed for, one grounded in normalcy. In her later interviews, Linda described her marriage to Bruce Cadwell as a sanctuary. After decades of being the public face of tragedy and legacy, she finally found peace in privacy. But even then, she never let go of her first husband's spirit. Photos of Bruce Lee still decorated her home, and she continued her involvement with the Bruce Lee Foundation alongside Shannon. Her new husband supported it wholeheartedly, understanding that loving Linda meant also honoring the life she had built with Bruce. When asked in an interview if she ever felt torn between her two lives, Linda smiled and said, "Love doesn't divide, it expands. My first Bruce taught me how to see the world. My second Bruce helped me live in it." It was a simple, profound truth that captured her essence, a woman capable of carrying deep loyalty and gentle acceptance all at once. By the time she entered her 70s, Linda had lived several lifetimes' worth of stories, from student to wife, widow to mother, teacher to guardian. Through all of it, she never lost her humility. When journalists tried to call her the First Lady of Martial Arts, she politely refused the title. "Bruce was the artist," she'd say. I was just the person lucky enough to witness it. Her love story remains one of the most enduring in modern history. Not because it was perfect, but because it was human. It was built on respect, intellect, and the ability to carry light through darkness. Even today, fans around the world who visit Bruce Lee's grave in Seattle often leave flowers not only for him, but for Linda, the woman who made sure the world never forgot who he truly was. She rarely gives interviews now, preferring to live quietly, but her words from years ago still echo powerfully. When you love someone completely, their absence doesn't end that love. It just becomes the space you live within. Part 2. She turned grief into teaching and became a mentor herself. Before she was known as Bruce Lee's wife, Linda Emery was a teacher, passionate about helping young minds grow, and even after living through loss, fame, and the weight of legend, she returned to that calling. For Linda, teaching was a way to heal, to pass on wisdom, and to reconnect with normal life after years of turbulence. After Bruce's death, she completed her studies and began teaching kindergarten and later high school English in California. Her classrooms were nothing like ordinary ones. Students described her as gentle yet deeply inspiring, the kind of teacher who didn't just talk about grammar or literature but about purpose and perseverance. She often quoted Bruce's lines to her students, blending philosophy with education. "Be water," she would tell them. "Adapt, flow, and stay true to yourself." Her approach to teaching was shaped by everything she'd been through. She didn't lecture. She told stories about how dreams take time, about how failure teaches more than success, about how strength isn't about fighting, but about continuing. Many of her students had no idea they were being taught by the widow of Bruce Lee, and Linda liked it that way. She wanted to be known not for her connection to fame, but for her ability to touch lives quietly. What's fascinating is how she adapted Bruce's martial arts philosophy into everyday learning. Just as Bruce broke away from rigid fighting systems to create Jeet Kune Do, Linda encouraged her students to think freely, to question rules, to find their own rhythm. She turned every lesson into a form of self-discovery. In a 2012 interview, one of her former students said, "Mrs. Cadwell didn't just teach English. She taught us how to face life. She told us, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control your response." That stuck with me forever. Linda's quiet mentorship extended beyond classrooms. She often met young martial artists, writers, and even filmmakers who came to her seeking guidance about Bruce. She never lectured or preached. She listened, then answered with clarity and grace. To one aspiring actor who asked how to find success like Bruce, she said, "Don't chase him. Understand him. He never tried to be famous. He tried to be honest. That's what made him unstoppable." Her ability to balance deep insight with humility made her a beloved figure in both education and philosophy circles. She also gave guest lectures at universities about Bruce's teachings on personal development, always emphasizing that martial arts was merely the medium. The message was self-expression. Through teaching, Linda didn't just pass on knowledge. She preserved her own sense of identity. She was no longer just the widow of Bruce Lee or the mother of Brandon and Shannon. She was a woman who had lived through extraordinary times and still believed in the potential of every individual. She once said, "Teaching keeps me connected to life. Every time I see a student understand something new, I feel Bruce smiling somewhere." That image of Linda in a classroom, still spreading light decades after tragedy, captures the true strength behind her calm exterior. Number 1. She remains the soul behind Bruce Lee's immortality. Today, more than 50 years after Bruce Lee's death, his image remains one of the most recognizable in the world. From murals in New York to statues in Hong Kong, from philosophy books to motivational videos, Bruce Lee's spirit continues to inspire millions. But behind that immortality stands one constant figure, Linda Lee Cadwell. Without her, Bruce's philosophy might have vanished into old notebooks and fading film reels. It was Linda who preserved his letters, manuscripts, and diaries. It was she who made sure Tao of Jeet Kune Do, the most definitive book on Bruce E.S. Marshall thought, was published in 1975. She worked closely with editors to arrange Bruce E.S. fragmented notes, ensuring his words stayed authentic. Every line, every passage that spoke of honest self-expression was protected by her hands. Even after decades, Linda has never let commercialization distort Bruce's image. In a world obsessed with branding, she stood firm. She allowed projects that honored his message, films, books, museum exhibitions, but rejected anything that trivialized him. Her quiet insistence on truth is the reason why Bruce Lee's name still represents purity, discipline, and self-mastery rather than mere celebrity. When documentaries or interviews feature her, Linda's presence radiates dignity. She never speaks with bitterness or regret, only gratitude. She tells the story of a young man who believed that the mind was limitless, and of the love that helped that belief survive even death. In one interview, she said, "People ask me if I miss Bruce. The truth is, I never stop missing him. But I also never stop feeling him near me." Through her daughter Shannon, the Bruce Lee Foundation, and her continued mentorship, Linda has created something extraordinary. Not just the preservation of a man's legacy, but the continuation of his mission. Bruce Lee wanted people to find freedom through discipline. Linda made sure that message never got lost in the noise of time. What's even more remarkable is that she did it all without demanding recognition. She never sought fame, never claimed credit, and never used Bruce's name for her own advantage. Her power has always been quiet, steady, and pure, the kind that shapes history without shouting. Linda once said that Bruce's greatest gift wasn't martial arts, but awakening others to their own potential. And, perhaps unknowingly, she carried that same gift. She awakened the world not through fists or philosophy, but through love. Unwavering, patient, and eternal. If Bruce was the flame that lit up the world, Linda was the lantern that kept that flame burning through storms. Every quote, every tribute, every new generation that discovers Bruce Lee's philosophy owes a silent debt to her. Her life proves one profound truth, that the greatest acts of love are often invisible, not in the spotlight but behind it. And that's why Linda Lee Cadwell isn't just Bruce Lee's wife. She's the reason his light never went out. Linda Lee Cadwell's story isn't just about being the partner of a legend. It's about resilience, purpose, and the quiet power of belief. From Seattle classrooms to Hong Kong studios, from handwritten letters to global movements, her influence runs deeper than most people realize. She didn't just share Bruce Lee's life, she helped define it, protect it, and carry it across generations. If you look closely at Bruce's timeless words, "Be water, my friend," you can see her reflection in them, calm, adaptable, unbreakable. She was, and still is, the water that carried his fire. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and share so more people can discover the real story behind the legend. Subscribe to our channel for more untold stories from history and beyond. Join the community to unlock exclusive deep dive videos and behind-the-scenes content. And if you'd like to show extra support, tap the thanks button below. Every contribution helps us bring more powerful stories to life. See you in the next video, where another hidden legend awaits.